Let me answer the question you came here for, right at the start. No, Yellowstone is not about to erupt. The United States Geological Survey, the federal agency that monitors every volcano in the country 24 hours a day, has Yellowstone listed at normal alert level. The chance of a major eruption in any given year is around 1 in 730,000. You are far more likely to be hit by lightning multiple times than to ever see Yellowstone erupt in your lifetime. So if it is not about to blow up, why is it on the news? Why is it called a supervolcano? And why do scientists spend their entire careers studying it? The answer is this. Beneath the most popular national park in America, there is a sleeping giant so enormous, so powerful, and so unlike any other volcano on Earth that what it has done in the past and what it could do in the future sits in a category of its own. This is not a story about whether Yellowstone will erupt. This is the story of what is actually underneath you when you walk through Yellowstone National Park. And the truth is bigger than the fear. Most people imagine a volcano as a tall, cone-shaped mountain with a single crater at the top. Mount Fuji, Mount Vesuvius, Mount St. Helens, that is what a volcano looks like. Yellowstone is not like that. Yellowstone is a volcano that, at first glance, does not look like a volcano at all. There is no peak, there is no crater you can climb to. From the air, the entire park appears to be a vast, green, peaceful landscape of forests, lakes, rivers, and meadows. Millions of people drive through it every year and never realize they are standing directly on top of one of the largest volcanic systems on the entire planet. Here is why. Yellowstone is what scientists call a caldera volcano. A caldera is created when a volcano erupts with so much force that it empties its own magma chamber. With nothing left to hold the ground up from below, the surface of the Earth simply collapses inward, creating a giant, bowl-shaped depression in the ground. That depression is the caldera. The Yellowstone caldera measures roughly 30 miles wide and 45 miles long. To put that into perspective, the caldera is bigger than the entire state of Rhode Island. You can drive across the floor of the volcano for over an hour without ever realizing you are inside it. The lakes, the geysers, the famous hot springs, all of it sits inside the crater of a single gigantic volcano that erupted hundreds of thousands of years ago. Almost everything that makes Yellowstone famous, from Old Faithful to the Grand Prismatic Spring, is part of the volcano. The park has more than 10,000 hot springs, geysers, mud pots, and steam vents. All of them are powered by the same source, the immense heat of the magma sitting just a few miles below your feet. And that magma is closer than you think. Modern scientists, using a technology called seismic imaging, have mapped what lies beneath the Yellowstone caldera with extraordinary detail. Seismic imaging is a bit like an ultrasound, but for the planet. By measuring how earthquake waves travel through the ground, scientists can build a three-dimensional picture of what is hiding under the surface. What they have found is staggering. Sitting between roughly 3 and 10 miles beneath the floor of Yellowstone is a single, connected magma chamber. It is around 55 miles long and 18 miles wide. That makes it one of the largest known magma chambers anywhere on Earth. To picture the scale, imagine an underground reservoir of molten rock larger than the size of New York City and Los Angeles combined, sitting just below the green meadows where tourists drive their cars and take photographs. Now, here is a fact that surprises most people. That entire chamber is not full of hot liquid lava ready to explode. The latest research suggests it is only somewhere between 5 and 15% molten at any given moment. The rest is hot, partially cooled rock solid enough that the chamber, in its current state, simply cannot produce a major eruption. Scientists believe that the chamber would need to be at least 50% molten before a super-eruption could even become possible. The Yellowstone Super Volcano, in other words, is not just sleeping. It is sleeping very, very deeply. But it has not always been that way. 3 times in the past 2 million years, Yellowstone has woken up. And every time it has woken up, the consequences have shaken the entire planet. Around 2.1 million years ago, long before humans existed, Yellowstone erupted for the first time on a scale we now call a super-eruption. A super-eruption is officially defined as any eruption that releases more than 240 cubic miles of magma, and Yellowstone's first one released around 2,200 cubic kilometers of material, putting it among the largest known volcanic eruptions in the history of the Earth. Geologists today call this eruption the Huckleberry Ridge event. The ash from this single explosion drifted on the wind and rained down across at least 15 modern-day U.S. states, stretching from California to Texas, north into Minnesota, and west into Idaho. The fallout was so heavy that in places the ash compressed into rock layers that geologists still find today, over 2 million years later, as bright white stripes in canyon walls, like a permanent bookmark in the rock record of the planet. Roughly 800,000 years later, the volcano did it again. The second super-eruption, known as the Mesa Falls event, occurred around 1.3 million years ago. It was smaller than the first, releasing somewhere around 67 cubic miles of magma, but still enormous on a global scale. And then, about 640,000 years ago, came the third one. This was the Lava Creek event, and it is the eruption that created the modern Yellowstone caldera we see today. It released about 240 cubic miles of magma. Ash from this single explosion has now been identified in 21 different U.S. states, as well as parts of Canada and Mexico. These were not normal volcanic eruptions. The largest of the 3 would have been roughly 2,000 times more powerful than the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. If a Lava Creek-sized eruption happened today, the consequences would be hard to imagine. Pyroclastic flows, those terrifying avalanches of superheated gas and rock, would race outward across the surrounding states of Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana, destroying everything within a 60-mile radius. Ash up to 3 feet deep would fall across the upper Midwest. Major cities like Denver, Chicago, and Minneapolis would be coated in volcanic dust. Air travel across most of the United States would be impossible for months. And just like Tambora in 1815, the sulfur gas released into the upper atmosphere would dim the sun and lower the global temperature for several years afterward. This is the worst-case scenario. And it is also the scenario that almost certainly will not happen, at least not in our lifetimes. You have probably heard the claim, repeated everywhere on the internet, that Yellowstone is overdue to erupt. This claim is one of the most stubborn myths in modern science. And it is wrong. The idea comes from a simple, almost convincing piece of maths. The 3 super-eruptions happened roughly 2.1 million, 1.3 million, and 640,000 years ago. If you average the intervals between them, you get a figure of around 730,000 years between major eruptions. Since the last one was 640,000 years ago, the math seems to suggest that the next one should be coming any moment now. There are 2 big problems with that reasoning. The first problem is that volcanoes do not work on a schedule. They are not like trains, leaving on a timetable. The intervals between the 3 known Yellowstone super-eruptions were not regular at all. One gap was about 800,000 years. The next was only about 660,000 years. Averaging numbers that are this irregular does not actually predict anything. The second problem is that Yellowstone's magma chamber, as we now know, is only a fraction molten. There is simply not enough liquid magma in there at the moment to produce a super-eruption. For one to occur, vast amounts of new molten rock would have to be injected into the chamber from deeper underground, and that process would take thousands or even tens of thousands of years to play out. Long before a super-eruption ever became possible, the entire region would experience massive, unmistakable warning signs. powerful earthquake swarms, rapid ground uplift, possibly tens of inches per year. Sudden explosions from the geysers and hot springs as the geothermal system was overwhelmed. We would have decades, maybe centuries of warning. Right now, Yellowstone is being watched as closely as any volcano on Earth. There are seismometers, GPS sensors, gas monitors, and thermal cameras spread across the park, sending data back to the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory every second of every day. And the data says the giant is still sleeping deeply. So what is the real story of Yellowstone? It is not a story of fear. It is a story of scale. It is the story of a national park that in 1872 became the very first national park in the world and which only later did humans realize was sitting on top of one of the largest volcanic systems on the planet. It is the story of 4 million people every year hiking, fishing, and camping inside the crater of a sleeping supervolcano, completely safe, completely unaware. It is the story of geysers shooting boiling water into the sky every 90 minutes, powered by a magma chamber so vast it could swallow entire cities. Yellowstone is not a threat we live in fear of. It is a wonder we live on top of. But one day, not next year, not in our lifetimes, but one day in the distant future the giant will stir. Maybe in 100,000 years. Maybe in 500,000. When that day comes, scientists will see it coming long, long before it happens. And when it finally does happen, just like it did 2.1 million years ago, and 1.3 million years ago, and 640,000 years ago, the whole planet will know about it. For now, the giant simply rests, hidden beneath the meadows and the hot springs and the wandering bison. And the most important thing to remember about the supervolcano sleeping beneath America is that, right now, it is sleeping very peacefully.